This is a Momentum Media production.
Investing Insights with Right Property Group, exploring trends in real estate and helping property investors gain financial security.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Investing Insights of Right Property Group, joined by directors of Right Property Group, Stephen, Waters and Victor Kumar. Gentlemen, how you going on this beautiful spring day? Here we are, spring selling season. It's all going crazy.
Bit of spring selling season and some mobility.
Yeah. You know, Steve, every time he starts off with Stephen, we know that there's a big sledge coming somewhere in the podcast.
Yeah, he's lining it somewhere, but it's we're aware of it. See, so we're on the front foot. We're aware of it, Victor.
Well, our listeners right now can't actually see us. You're listening to us, and welcome everyone. But I just, Victor, want to pick up Stephen's hand positioning at the moment. I think that's actually quite.
It's strictly for the birds, you know.
See that, Victor? It's just an insight. That's his tell. That's his tell. You know exactly where he's mentally positioned at the moment. He's getting fired up. He's a bit aggressive, no doubt, because of this property market we're in now. Gentlemen, quick summary. We haven't spoken on air for a month, and for everyone, this is now episode 59. Season 5 of Investing Insights Right Property Group. So for nearly 5 years, we've been going deep into property and property investment and how you can actually do what you do better. You probably all know that I've lent on these guys for many years to support the portfolio creation within smart property investment, and we still get a kick out of talking about it. You can tune in if you want to myself and Steve. We'll be having a chat in about a week's time on the Smart Property Investment Show about our portfolio. So go and have a look at it. But 1 month, let's do a quick summary. Number 1, new premier. Number 2, New South Wales is out of lockdown and accelerating quickly. We've hit 80% vaccination rates, accelerating quickly to full freedoms. Number 3, international travel to start without quarantining in New South Wales within a month. Number 4, we have a new security arrangement and agreement, and we're getting nuclear-powered submarines. Number 5, Victoria, the most lockdown place on earth through COVID-19, still getting a huge amount of cases. Next point, looks like we'll be able to travel to Brisbane for Christmas. The Premier Palaszczuk up there has told us it's all happening. That's 30 days since we last spoke, and look at the shift and change. Another point, property markets are open. You now go into an open home. You can actually go and touch and feel the property. Auctions in person are happening. Hold on, this is where we are right now. We're rapidly accelerating to getting back to some level of normal. But is this market, Victor, this property market, Victor, in any way is a normal market right now?
I don't think so. First of all, the goalposts keep shifting, and the FOMO effect is very much there, right? So as we get these so-called freedom, people are rushing in to buy. There's a lot more people that are coinciding with the spring selling season in inverted commas. They're looking at putting their properties in the market. So it's for most that are prepared, it's business as usual. But for the people that have been sitting on the sidelines to say, look, I want to touch and feel, I need to visit the property physically, personally, rather than trusting a professional, it's open season for them to buy, right? And therein lies some of the problem, where we are likely to see not a COVID spike, but a COVID-induced price spike as we get our freedom back.
Are you feeling freer, Vicky? You're in one of those LGAs all locked up, isolated from the world. Are you been out and about? Have you walked into a property yet? Have you looked at a property, or are you now an armchair realestateinvesting.com.au warrior and doesn't leave the comforts of his plush Chesterfield?
I maintain my silence on that on account that it may incriminate me. Read what you will on that one.
I don't think the Bentley's wheels have turned to full rotation in 6 months.
You just see him sitting in his garage with the pedal down, just getting the engine rolling over like Ferris Bueller's Day Off in reverse, trying to take K's off the. But Steve? But what a topsy-turvy market we're in right now. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Must be completely unique, or are you going to go, all the clues are there. We've been here before. It's just different environment.
You actually missed off another piece of sort of the last month, I think it was anyways, with APRA's
absolutely
announcement.
Yeah, missed that.
Have I seen this before? Like I know that the media and the data houses are saying this is the most accelerated rate of growth that we've had. But as I've said on a few occasions, I had properties double in 12 months back in the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001 or something like that.
From like 100 to 200 grand in western suburbs of Sydney.
Exactly. Yeah. 105 to 210 on the dot on the day. But that wasn't the whole of Sydney. That was just a localized area, to be fair. It's not a crazy market. And if you go back to our podcasts well before COVID started, we actually talked about way back then that there were areas of Australia that were undersupplied or the pipeline was empty and that there would be an undersupplied moment, inflection point in the future. It's just that COVID has brought it forward. And here we are today. I think, though, with people's inability to move around, which has put time on their hands to rethink their life, to rethink their retirement, to rethink their whatever they're doing in life and how insecure life is around employment, people are trying to give themselves a chance for the future should something like this happen again. But in terms of the crisis itself, every few years there's a crisis. It just wears a different hat. To be fair, though, not quite as big as this, but there's always something that will, every now and again, that will activate markets or deactivate markets, put people to the sidelines or bring them in to play the game, so to speak. And we're just in that now. So was it obvious that this was going to happen? Well, no, COVID wasn't. But for me, the result was. And perhaps not to the level percentage growth numbers, but the general trajectory, absolutely.
Yeah, and COVID by no means is over. We still have quite a long way to go as a nation to navigate out of COVID-19. There's still all the economic implications, ramifications of that, Victor. But sort of philosophically, how are you approaching supporting your clients moving into a brave new world, considering the shadow that will be cast by COVID? You go back to the GFC, and everyone spoke about it for years subsequent to it and the impacts of it. How long is there going to be this sort of COVID complexity shaping the way in which Australians invest in property?
Look, we can take lessons from the past, right? So we can take lessons from the GFC, and immediately as we came out of the GFC, people will quite a bit like bull at the gates, buying properties left, right, and center because finance freed up and all that. And this is where a lot of people did get financially hurt in an environment where you shouldn't have been financially hurt. The reason being that they were chasing the quick dollar and not addressing the true fundamentals of property investing and going and jumping into areas where there was media-focused growth or media-heightened growth in that sense. And the same is likely to happen as we emerge out of COVID. A couple of things that we need to keep in mind. One is obviously everyone's doing the sums right now at the current interest rates. And we know for a fact that the interest rates, this has been the lowest it's ever been. And as part of your normal finance cycle within your portfolio, you go from interest only to the interest only period ending and going to your standard variable rates as part of your mortgage setup. And this is something that if you're absolutely redlining yourself in terms of your borrowing limits right now and not taking into account that lending is changing and it will change, and you will turn from interest only to principal and interest, and therefore your payments would also increase as well. It can hurt you in the medium to longer term as that happens. So it's important that we take that into account and not be over exuberant in terms of accumulating multiples of properties without doing those sums first.
I think that's a really good point. I'd also add that, if you're at circa 3% today and you're doing those numbers at 3%, if you get caught at 4% within 12 months, when then something's dramatically gone wrong in your ability to monitor your own situation and your portfolios, there are plenty of mechanisms and indicators out there that will show us what rates are doing to some degrees, but we've also got the ability to fix them for up to 5 years. So whilst doing your numbers based on the lowest rate possible as a point of survival is crazy, there's also an element of being too negative in your own capability and situation if you're always predicting them at 5. and modelling out at 5. I know people say, well, look, the statistical average, is 5%. It's a different world today, massively different. And we had a massive high in there as well at 17 and 20% odd that dragged that average up. And so too will today's long term of low rates that will drag that average down. So be aware and monitor.
Just picture, and I think you're talking like 1992 times, Steve, when interest rates were up at 17%. Just think back to that. It's madness. Like, will it ever happen again? Will we ever have 17% interest rates? I know the Prime Minister at the time was livid about it. He said it was structural deficiencies which pumped that up. And he'll remember, I think it was Keating, for being the custodian of those ridiculous high interest rates. And is that ever going to happen again? Maybe.
Look, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. And I think if you lined up 5 economists today, they'd all duck and weave that question.
Well, the 5 economists, the same ones that said property was going to drop by 25 to 30% when COVID first hit, right? So it's like the weather.
Well, yes. Look, whether it happened or not, we've got to if you compare back then to today, we've got almost a different banking system. We have different products. Think about it. Think about an offset as an example. I don't think the low doc loan even existed back then as well, which probably accentuated growth.
Low doc started coming in really late 90s, right? With your peppers and your bluestones were really pioneers in that.
Yeah. So look, I think the future, whilst it's uncertain in terms of interest rates and the global economies, because as you say, we're going to have COVID for quite some time. It's just it's a living with it scenario, and Australia can look at other countries that are doing so and how they're adapting and surviving. I think our vaccination rates is really a reaction to being locked down. Australians, well, no one likes to be locked down, but the carrot was there. Get yourself vaccinated and we'll have some mobility.
We moved quickly once we actually got around to it. You think back to
Correct.
Early days in this sort of second round of the pandemic, there was slow to uptake, but, we needed that catalyst. But, you spoke, Stephen, you mentioned, and I left it out of my initial sort of brief, policy intervention with APRA and you should be self-assessing. And I talk about this a lot. Should be self-assessing at 5.56%. Just because the bank's happy to give you a mortgage at high 2s or low 3s doesn't necessarily mean that that's where your assessment level should be. So obviously the banks think that people aren't doing that themselves. So APRA's coming in.
We'll do it for you.
Jack it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, as we've mentioned before, there's 2 types of affordability. One is what the bank tells you can afford, and the second is what you really can afford. And that could be either north or south of what the bank is telling you. So to always be redlining it, as Victor put it earlier on, that's just suicidal. Even if rates don't go up, there might be something in your life that it triggers the same event, so to speak, or the same repercussion. So loading the rates up somewhat, I think, is important, but also not being to the point of stupidity either way. There is talk of rates going to 0. There are talk of rates going to 5%. And, if inflation, if we get inflation and some are talking hyperinflation, well, then your rates are going to go up. But, there's other ramifications, good and bad, to that as well.
So one of the byproducts of COVID with people working from home is people assessing their household expenditure. Obviously, home deliveries and food delivery has gone up. But there's a lot of discretionary spending that people have been starting to question. And the flow-on effect of this is that, as I take a vein from what Steve just said, we need to know our household budgets. And more so than ever, we need to know how much we can afford in terms of discretionary spending towards investing and discretionary spending towards life. And we need to work that out really, really to the last cent, so that when these rates do come in at the high amount, or when the credit restrictions do kick in, we're not left out on a limb. And equally importantly, I think one of the things that we need to be looking at within the portfolio is, with the way that rents are moving, you need to always challenge your property manager to say, okay, if they're saying, I'll give you an example in my portfolio, right? So a fortnight ago, I got one of the property managers automated email to me saying that, your lease is about to expire. We suggest we renew the lease at the same amount. And I actually jumped online and could see that I'd certainly be the cheapest around, one of the cheapest. So I pushed back and I said, well, I want an increase of $20. And lo and behold, we got an increase of $20. So these are housekeeping things as investors that we need to continue doing. And just because we get freedom, we don't want to move away from the general housekeeping of investing.
That's a good point, Vic. Too many times people are concentrating on expenditure only and forgetting about the income side of things, which is clearly our rents and the like. The other thing which I find interesting, not that this is an economics podcast, but here's something to think about for the future. So clearly over the last 2 years, we've had no international travel. We've been locked at home, so the cars haven't been moving, the fuel hasn't been consumed, the wear and tear on the vehicles, the discretionary spending by going out to the restaurants, the movies, to Queensland, to Tassie, wherever it may be. So people's expenditure, for the most, has reduced, which in turn has built up savings and offset facilities and what have you. So when they're going for a loan and the banks are assessing, there's not a lot of outgoings. It's more about savings, which the banks like. What happens when we get the mobility and people start to travel, consume, e-tolls, fuel, cars, registration, travel, everything else that goes along with it that takes from the household budget? Will we see, in combination with APRA's 0.5%, potentially another 0.5% in the foreseeable future, that in combination will reduce people's capacity to borrow? And that's when you'll start to see the shallowing off of the growth rate of properties. And the other question, this one's for you, Phil. I'm going to turn the tables. I'll be the journo.
Ooh.
And
I don't
ask
like
you
being
the
asked
question.
questions.
I know you should. If only everyone could have seen your face, then it was just like, I wasn't paying attention, but I am now.
Mate, people are going to find out. People are going to find out, Steve, that I don't know what I'm talking about. Just be easy.
This is how bad a journo would make. I just forgot what I was going to ask.
There you go. You see what I did there?
I know you did well.
the old left field bamboozle, mate.
Oh my God. You did left, right.
Got it?
Me.
No,
yes,
no. You're going to ask me a question about.
There goes my attention span.
Wow. There you go.
That's pretty.
Well, let's stick in our lanes, gents, because I don't purport to knowing anything about property. I'm told adequate at talking to people about property, and we've been doing this now for 5 years, so something's going right. And I check out the stats and the rankings on this podcast at Apple. It's always good to see. Thanks so much, everyone, for that feedback coming in. It's, we do this once a month, so it's good to know it's resonating with you all out there. Tell your friends about it as well. It's a good way to actually, whether you're new to investing or you're looking to recalibrate, just check in once a month with this, and might make you reflect and analyze or interpret where you're going in your property journey. Better be if you can leave a review for us, we get a real kick out of it. It's just not us here. We've got a great team who make us sound good and do all this sub-editing and stuff. Make Steve sound especially good, particular. Anyway, you got that question yet? I've just stalled for you. I've let you think. No?
No, I should be listening.
All right. Well, I'm actually going to speak to someone who actually knows about property, Victor Kumar, the king of Campbelltown. And I remember Victor. I like a story. One of my first memories of investing in property is meeting you on the high street of Campbelltown out the front of Rashi's. And we drove around and checking out, like, this is old green as grass, right? Just going, whoa, what's all this about? Really? Is that how it works? Wow, this is sort of crazy stuff. And I thank you for that intro. But, introducing me to this great world that is property. But let's actually talk about property and what's going on, because that's what people want to know. And I think sort of contextually, we're in this sort of market in flux. You're getting policy intervention. We're getting the fact that, to the point, there is family balance sheets are as good as what they ever have been. Borrowing capacity probably at the savings side. You could probably present a better position or picture to the banks in lockstep with them trying to slow down lending. What's going on with the markets? I want to do a quick sort of, let's see what's happening across Australia in those key markets, and we'll stick to capital cities. But at the top end of it, metro versus rural or regional. Victor, give me some sense to this sort of, is there a two-speed market, or are all sort of the tide lifting all boats right across Australia?
At the moment, the tide's lifting all boats. Yeah, and that's largely because people are, first of all, looking for lifestyle and they're moving homes, but also investing-wise, if they can't get a foot in because of how fast the price is moving in the metropolitan, they are starting to look at regional areas as well. And this is where if you do your research well and look at the employment nodes and take away the COVID filter, because eventually that will be taken away. That's where you need to be deciding and deciphering whether that mix in your portfolio is worthwhile or not, right? The other thing that's also happening is that, as I mentioned earlier, the FOMO effect is still very much there, more so than ever, because the mobility is starting to come back and people are rushing to get in. And equally importantly, the agents have now moved with technology, right? So what used to be, giving you an in when someone's negotiating and you get in with your contracts a lot faster because you actually drove your contract in or you email the contract back in. Now everything's DocuSign. So a lot of if I can equate it to spending on a credit card, right? You don't actually feel the money going away when you're spending on the credit card. And my fear is that property is slowly getting towards that where you're signing digital contracts and all that. So the enormity of the debt that you're going to get into if you get it wrong is sort of lost on a lot of the punters out there. And this would be the new crisis that will be unfolding where, again, with the FOMO effect, the lower rates, the less properties on the market, that's certainly going to create an issue down the track. So if I come back to what's happening in the market here, and if you look at New South Wales, certainly there's some strong momentum still upwards in terms of growth. The disparity between houses and units is quite large, from a 30.5% disparity between median prices. It's now sitting at 58%. So there is a correction there to be had at some point in time, and natural shift, as we're starting to slowly see, is towards these units as the houses become unaffordable. But this is stock standard of the two large markets in Australia, the Melbourne market and the Sydney market. And Melbourne coming out of its lockdown, that'll certainly also allow it to catch up to the accelerated growth that Sydney has had. So there's likely to be a spike of growth there as well.
Yeah, so let's sort of go city by city and to point around sort of regional and metro. A lot of it, one of the sort of key dynamics there is this lifestyle decisions, which has really changed, which is a product of COVID. And I think that's going to be a structural thing, which is not going to really go away. I think we're now in this zone where there's an acceptance around hybrid working, and I think
there's the question.
Will continue.
Before we continue with the market update, you've just triggered the question in my head back to you. What are your thoughts and your belief around the sea change, tree change to the regional areas and the exodus from the major cities to that? A, is it sustainable? And B, if it is or isn't, when do you see a bounce?
Good question. Not sustainable is what I would say. Absolutely. Right now, I think it's a moment in time. And for a lot of people who are making those significant sea and tree change decisions, I'm talking moving beyond an hour and a half of a capital city. I think for a lot of people, it's going to come back and bite them, and they're going to get hurt as a result of it. And what will manifest is buying at the peak of a market in a regional town and working out or realizing that it's not for them for whatever reason that is, and trying to replace those same dollars in a city location to try and get back in the market that they left. I think that's going to be a big issue for a lot of people moving forward. When that will happen, give it a couple of years. I think you need the honeymoon will last for a period of time living in a place where you typically would want to holiday. But when the realities of work, realities of change, realities of schools, realities of kids growing up in an area where there's not that much to do, some of the challenges and complications around that, there's going to be a flight back to city locations moving forward. Yes, and we need to remember, my view, Steve, you've got to put things into perspective, that everyone gets carried away with this whole notion of flexible work. That's great if you work in a role which is more knowledge working type economy, where your job is to sit in front of a computer and press keys on a keyboard or talk over a microphone like we're doing right now. That's some people. That's not all people or most people. Most people still need to use their hands to do their job in an area which is conducive for conducting business. I'm talking factories, I'm talking hospitals, I'm talking airports, I'm talking all these locations where jobs actually happen. So it's a bastion of the few, I think, the opportunity to work remotely and or in a hybrid environment. However, it seems to have absorbed everyone's mindset that that's the way it is right now. So my view, be careful about it. be careful what you wish for when it comes to shifting, even if, even that's from an owner-occupier point of view, but even chasing for an investment point of view, maybe there's a little bit more sustainability around that, because if you buy in one of these towns as an investment property, you're probably going to get people who are chasing their dreams backwards and forwards. So there'll probably be a need for at least some sort of rental accommodation. If that doesn't work, no doubt you can let it out as holiday rental. So that's my view, Steve. I think it's a very complicated scenario. And a lot of people are probably making decisions right now, which they will probably regret into the future. And there's going to be financial consequences as a result of it. Bit hard.
I think what you've done is read my blog word for word.
Oh, yeah. Great mind, Steve.
Yeah, must be. No, look, I agree. And the reason I asked that question is because if we are doing a market update and we do capital cities, well, then we need to do the regional areas as well. And I believe some regional areas will stay strong. But it comes down to the definition of regional at the same time. I think some areas are going to be a hard luck story potentially in your publications in the years to come.
Yeah.
And that cycle will rotate once again. Trigger points are different, but it'll be the same news story at the end of the day in some of these areas. But as I said, some will be sustainable.
Now, the big capitals which have diversified economies, and the same, COVID is largely irrelevant in this equation, Steve. It's those regional areas which we've spoken about for many years, which have diversified economies. If anything, this is just going to accelerate those rural areas' advancements to where it would have gone. And I think of places like Orange or your Bathurst of the world in New South Wales, where it's got those inherent capabilities of diversification. It's got to be attracting more people out there, potentially looking for lifestyle changes. The biggest winners out of this are those locals that have lived in these areas for many, many years and have just seen property values just rocket. I reckon a lot of them are probably sitting and going, hey, I'm going to sell my property to some stupid Sydney-sider or Melbourneite and go and retire down to the South Coast somewhere with twice as much money in my back pocket than what I would have had. They're the biggest winners.
Yeah, and look, for those that don't understand data or interpret it correctly, those types of areas that you're referring to will show an annualized average growth because of the last few years larger than what it really, really is. I bought it at 100, now it's worth 10 million. It's because of this madness that's happened over the last couple of years. Now, but having said that, there are, once again, to stress, there are some areas that have always been good. They've just had higher rates of growth in these regional areas over the last couple of years. But there will be some sad losers as future rolls out.
These areas would have had traditionally, take COVID away, there would still would have been good areas to invest in because of all the employment nodes and the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the important thing. Population growth is not a precursor to growth.
Yeah.
Jobs. You need jobs. And you can have all growth in the world, but no jobs, and you'll have no asset growth or relevant asset growth as well.
It's a super complicated scenario, and we'll see it play out. This is argument, Steve, of if you can work remotely, as in not from a node where you share some sort of office or some sort of environment where people work, your job can be offshored pretty quickly as well, right? So I reckon they're talking about now this idea for those business owners out there of the great resignation come early next year, when everyone comes back in the office after no one's wanted to really sort of shift too much during this period of time. I just saw some stats then on a thing I was reading before coming on, have a chat with you guys, where over 50% of all Australians are going to be looking for a new or different job next year. That's what the stats are saying right now. And what they're looking for is flexibility. What they're looking for is, all that sort of stuff. So I think if you can apply that as a business owner, you should be able to keep and retain your people. But for those people sitting out there at the end of a node, some sort of commercial economic node is connected with the business, just be very careful. I'd be making decisions around the certainty or security of your job. Things change. Yeah. It's a tough one.
So the movement of people this new year would be a lot more accentuated because of people making those decisions. And I suppose more than likely, we are likely to see going into the Christmas period, it would be unlike other Christmases where the market actually slows down. It may be that the key areas will start to accelerate because people then have time off. And then actually with the mobility going to look at properties and buying the investments, buying the new principal place of residence. or even uprooting life and moving interstate, right? So these are things that we need to look towards and potentially ignore that spike and come back to, okay, what's the normality? And that should help make our investment decisions.
Well, it depends on whether you're a speculator or an investor.
Yeah.
If you're
two very different things. Mate, there's another podcast for us. Let's mark that. So speculation versus property investment.
But before we go on, one of the things that we still haven't talked about, or we haven't mentioned, I should say, is with the federal and state governments jockeying for who gets the lion's share of open borders, international borders for that matter. Now, some of the premiers have said, come one, come all, we'll have you all. And the federal government has said, well, hang on, let's
take it easy.
Take it easy. Let's just think this through and how we're going to do it. But nonetheless, the federal government slated this probably 3-4 months ago now, is we need massive amounts of immigration into this country. Now, whether that's an open door policy where the volume just flows through a narrow channel into Australia, or whether it's going to be more about a staged event and a safer way to get people here in terms of the numbers, ultimately it'll have the same effect. Just one bit may be a little bit more delayed, and that is pressure on accommodation in what is typically some undersupplied areas already. And if we roll that up with what potentially APRA is doing, and this is, whilst it's not a market update, it's things that people should be considering now for maybe a year's market update and how it can change. So if APRA's lending policies, well, the first one, the LIBOR 0.5%, which was more of a psychological play, as we've talked about before. Potentially there might be another one, so reduced capacity for investors to invest, even though the intent will be there, the ability may not be as much as before. They retreat from the market because they're made to. You've got the owner-occupier that was now priced out, so they've become a rent investor. Then you've got population growth externally from external resources coming in, or avenues coming into your localized cities in what is potentially undersupplied, no investors in the market to supply accommodation, and we'll start to see those rents amplify on top of what they already are. So the government and the banking system or regulator is in a damned if they do and damned if they don't position at the end of the day. And that is ultimately going to shape the markets, and it's going to shape where people live in combination with jobs. And that's what we should be looking forward to, or looking through to, rather than knee-jerk reactions about what's happening now.
And again, it just lends to the commentary around how complex and multifaceted this current market is. And I wanted to sort of chat about all the different capital city markets, but I think let's pause that for next month, November, as Australia gets ready for summer. And I think you're going to get a very different market this year, Vic, over that Chrissy period where often real estate sort of goes on pause, but I think you're going to see like a belated spring selling season. It's going to be a summer selling season. But to that point, and you mentioned it, Steve, getting your checkbook out. I remember sitting there, and you guys would have done this as well, where you would rock up out at auction with a checkbook in your back pocket, ready to ride out if you were successful, a 0.25% check. We've done some really good buying in that period running up to Chrissy. So considering where we are right now, and you've got low stock, depending where you are, lowish stock or low good stock out there. There's probably a lot of units for sale. You've got low stock, a lot of buyers, still cheap money, finance, people got pre-approvals ready to go. Whether they stack up under the new APRA assessments, who knows? It's a challenge itself in it. Is it going to be a good time to be investing in real estate over this period? And if you are, where should you be having your checkbook ready to roll? Victor, Steve, for you to kick off?
Yeah, the best time was yesterday, always. Doesn't matter what the market's doing. There's always an opportunity, up, down, sideways, whatever it may be. I think it more comes around making sure that you're choosing investment grade, not investment stock, and playing within your own thresholds and capacities. Victor mentioned earlier on about those people that need to touch it, feel it, kick the wheels, so to speak. There's always going to be a portion of those people. That's just human nature, and they potentially will enter the market now. Or if they're that way inclined, they might also say, "Well, I've missed a big spurt of growth. Is now really the best time to get into the market?" In and around Christmas, though, I'm yet to think there'll be any change in terms of the buying patterns. People have got a bit of mobility now, and so we may see stock on the market, but we also may see people say, you know what, I'm just going to put buying on hold. It's a crazy market. I can get to Queensland, I can get to Perth, I can get to Tassie, South Australia, wherever it may be. I'm going to do that.
Take some holidays and buy in the middle of the year.
Well, just as I get back from, holidays. So let's call it late January. But ultimately, I don't think there's going to be much of a change between now and January in terms of the tempo of the market.
What is that? That's a really good point, Vic. Well, what is the tempo of the market? And we've only had now 1 week in New South Wales, so people back to auctions. And I saw some of the coverage on the television over the weekend, people out in droves. But give me some sense for the tempo of the market. Is it beating at a million beats per minute, or is it sort of just got a steady sort of flow?
It is beating pretty steadily, right? So it's not a slow beat in that sense. So one of the things that the agents were anticipating that with mobility returning, that they'll have a whole heap of people going through open homes. That's actually, in most of the agents that I'm talking to, this actually hasn't happened. People are still quite comfortable doing things online now. And it's only after they've negotiated, they're starting to wanting to see the property physically. Right? But these are your seasoned investors, the seasoned buyers. But your number of properties and the number of buyers is still not matching, right? So there is still an undersupply of properties coming onto the market as opposed to the number of people that are buying. There's also that added urgency with people with expiring finance so that they don't get caught up with the new assessment rates if they've got a long enough pre-approval. And so they are urgently trying to get in the market. And for some, given the low interest rate, they're not averse to paying 20, 30, 40K more than what someone else is willing to pay just to get into the market. And whilst that is the market at the moment, we don't want to be unnecessarily paying too high a price. But equally importantly, we want to be resetting our expectation from the pre-COVID days to what the market is now, knowing that prices really come down significantly. And if you look at it over the long term, provided you bought in good fundamental areas with good employment, good infrastructure, good demographics, over the long term, it just works out.
Well, I never thought we'd be talking about all these different moving parts in a market with the COVID overlay. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of commonalities with this market versus other markets, but there is a bit of an X factor.
I think there's always many moving parts. COVID, to be fair though, has added a few different anomalies around human nature and how it's going to roll out. But there's always the moving parts. And as I said, I don't know if it was another podcast, the data is one thing, which is very, very important. But now's as good an example as ever is trying to identify the trends first that become the data.
Yeah.
And COVID has highlighted that, a million times over.
Well, that's when art meets numbers, right?
Correct.
And the best investors can telegraph what the data is going to be showing in 3-6 months' time. But gents, I've really enjoyed today. We've actually gone quite long there. So next month, tune in. We're going to do a deep dive into all the different markets and how you should be framing and shaping buying decisions at the moment. Are you guys back on a plane? When are you next on a plane? You must be getting ready to head out to. You can't really go too many places. You can go internationally before you can go interstate. Yeah, I know. No, I'm getting itchy feet. I get to see the rest of the team around the country face to face. But it's where's your first flight going to be? Where are you going to go?
I think I'd go to Queensland just to see team members and family, and then I'd probably West Coast and back to Melbourne, do the big lap. Yeah, sounds pretty good, Vic. Same.
Yeah, pretty much the same.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe we can do. We can make an excuse to find a Friday afternoon to do this somewhere on a beach in Queensland.
We call it the On the Road podcast.
On the road, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can go and check out one of these properties that we've got up in Brisbane. We can have a look around that and do it live.
I think it'd be more along the line. He wants us to help him do a reno, is what he wants.
That's what
Don't fall for it, mate. Don't fall for it.
Yeah, stranger things happen. Gentlemen, thanks so much. That's Victor Kumar and Steve Waters.
Pleasure.
Directors at Right Property Group, investing insights of the Right Property Group. Remember, Victor, where do we go if we want more info from you guys?
Reach us to on our digital platforms, our website or our Facebook page, and send us a message. And Melissa from our office will be in touch with you to explain our services and set up a time for a chat with either myself or Steve.
Excellent. I hope you enjoy that, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature, does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed